French squad for the November international, folks, has been named. 3 games await the French in 3 different cities as well, as far as I'm aware. Wallabies, South Africa, and Japan. Paris, Marseille, and Toulouse are the venues, is my understanding. So it's going to be an interesting one for the 6 nations reigning champions, home favourites for their World Cup next year. They get to play some games at home against some Tier 1 opposition. And, we get to see just some of these matchups, because the French are doing pretty well. I mentioned the 6 nations, the world rankings and whatnot. So, it's going to be very tasty for this side in November. They have got a few guys out injured, like Fabien Galthié is unavailable, Melvin Jaminet is unavailable, Arthur Vincent is unavailable, and then in the forwards, Francois Cruz and Cyril Bay. These guys are all injured. Obviously, Vakatawa had to retire with that heart condition. So, there's a few new faces in this French squad. I'll be relying on some of our top 14 experts to give us some insights into some of the new faces. Largely it's relatively familiar stuff, with the return of a couple of old favourites as well. I mean, Bougaret, Marchand, and Malvaka. That's kind of pretty steady as she goes at this point in Fabien Galthié's picking. For the props, there are a couple of new faces in Rida Wardi, the 27-year-old loosehead prop. He's about 110 kilos, seems like a relatively big unit. And then a guy who's playing in Division 2 in France, 25-year-old tight head prop named Thomas Laclayette. Galthié seems to have a knack of picking guys playing lower levels of rugby and then immediately being able to get them to step up. Whether he gets any game time, because they've also picked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other props, remains to be seen. Maybe a game against Japan, whose scrum is maybe a little bit less intimidating than like a Springbok front row, or a guy like Taniela Tupou kind of scrumming at you from the Wallabies. But there's certainly a couple of new faces, and Galthié seems to like picking a relatively big squad, maybe getting a look at the players, seeing what they're like in training, seeing the personality, seeing how they gel together, maybe giving them some instructions, even if they don't get any game time. That just seems to be one of his things. Also, quite a few locks being picked. Paul Willems is there, Roman Tafa-Fanua, so very familiar faces. Sharsies is there as well. Florian Verhaeghe is one of the still uncapped guys, although I feel like this must be his 3rd French squad. He's been picked before, but still remains uncapped. And then Flamand and Woki are those guys who can kind of drop into the back row or compete in the second row, depending on what the requirements are. And also the back row is looking very, very competitive. I mean, Johan Tonga is still in the squad, and he was phenomenal over in Japan. He had a great, good impact on the game, just such a strong ball carrier. Makalu is still there. Remember, he moonlights out on the wing sometimes when needs be. Genuinely, if the French pick only 2 backs on the bench, having a guy like Makalu who can and has gotten game time out on the wing is valuable. But I mean, you got Aldrit, you got Creton, you got Olivon, and then you've got Gelon, and then this uncapped guy, Jordan Joseph, who's a 22-year-old number 8. So it's very competitive. Another one who I'm not sure if he gets any game time as a young man, but very competitive back row looking from the French. For the backs, Dupont, Kuyu, and Luku are the halfbacks. That seems to be kind of steady, she goes. I mean, it's basically Dupont and other, depending on how many minutes Dupont plays. It's usually a lot. It's usually 60 plus. Luku tends to be the guy who backs up from there. Intermark is also named, although it seems like he's not had a lot of game time in the top 14 this season thus far. Jalibert is the other guy, plus this guy Leo Berdo. I don't know a lot about him, other than that he's 24 years old and plays mostly 10, but can also drop back to fullback if needs be. So it's sometimes good to have a utility guy there as well. Midfield is pretty steady, but there's this guy Pablo Rubetti, a 25-year-old midfielder, alongside the big unit that is Dante, the skills machine that is Fiku. Bakasi is there, Moefana. Moefana was phenomenal in Japan as well. So, the midfield's looking pretty strong. And I mentioned the return of a couple of older faces. Alvaro Tiraca, he is back in the squad. He hasn't played for France, I want to say, over a year. Also, Anthony Boutier, who I don't think he played for France at all in 2021. But he was dropping bombs from fullback. He's got a huge boot. Back in 2020. Like, he's legit got highlight level kicks for touch, which is a pretty impressive thing to do. So he is back. He maybe benefits from Jaminet being injured. Dulin can't get into the squad because I guess they are just so stocked. Fullback Ramo is there. Lebel is there. Romain Bourreau is there. He's, I think, mostly a fullback but can also play wing. So there's another candidate for fullback. Ethan Dumotier. 21-year-old winger. We've got Damien Penaud, who is putting his hand up for one of the best wingers in the world. French side is looking pretty stacked. It's easy to say that when they're winning a lot, but genuinely, it's sometimes hard to see these new names, who I'm not that familiar with, getting game time ahead of some of these well-established world-class players. But, as I said, some of these guys may just be in the squad to give the coaches a chance to look at them a bit closer. Some of them may be getting some game time. I would assume if there's going to be experimentation done, it'll be in that third game against Japan. But you never know. Galthié is a pretty clever customer, so he may have other plans up his sleeve. Teddy Thomas is another one whose name is kind of conspicuous in his absence, but he's like the number one guy. Whenever I go on French Rugby Facebook and turn on the translations, Teddy Thomas is the number one guy that whenever he gets selected, that's who all the people are concerned by, the fact that he keeps getting picked. So I'm assuming people are a bit happier with this team. You guys let us know your thoughts. Who should we be looking out for of those uncapped guys? Do you see any of these guys as genuine contenders to get starts, or are they just kind of there to be squad members and learn from the more experienced guys? I would assume France at home, with the way they've been playing, probably should be aiming for 3 from 3, but certainly going to be tricky. The Wallabies on their day can genuinely knock off any team. South Africa are trying to hunt back down their number one spot in the world, and France and Japan are getting kind of familiar with each other right now, having played that 2-match series in July. So happy days, folks. You guys let us know your thoughts. If you want French rugby gear, check out Lovell Rugby. They've got all kinds of stuff. French jerseys from last year, jackets, signed ball by, I think it was Dupont from Grand Slam winner, if you got like £300 to spend. But check it out. They're an affiliate channel. Take care, guys. I'll talk to you again soon. See you later.